So, you've decided you're going to learn a new language. You're definitely not alone in that. I mean, with a phone right in your pocket, it feels like fluency should be, just a few taps away. But with all these apps promising the world, why do so many of us just give up? Okay, let's get into it and figure out what it really takes to learn a language in 2025.
Yeah, this quote really hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It's from a review of Duolingo, but honestly, it's about something way bigger. We pour hours into these apps, right? Our streaks get longer and longer, and we feel super productive. But here's the question. Are these apps actually powerful learning tools, or are they just really, really good at making us feel like we're learning?
And that is the big question we're going to tackle today. We're going to look at the whole promise of learning on an app, then we'll dive into the science of how our brains actually pick up a new language. And finally, we'll figure out how you can build a smarter, way more effective strategy to, actually hit those goals.
All right, so first up, let's talk about that app-fueled promise. And look, let's be real here. There's a very good reason we all start with apps. Their popularity has just exploded, and they've done an amazing job of lowering the barrier to entry for literally millions of people.
I mean, the appeal is just undeniable. These apps use all that gamification stuff, the streaks, the points, the leaderboards, to make it feel like you're just playing a fun little game. And honestly, for getting started, for building that first bit of vocabulary, or getting a feel for how sentences work, they can be fantastic. It's a super compelling pitch. But, and this is the big but, does that early momentum actually translate into a real conversation?
And that brings us right to the core of the problem. It's this feeling that the progress you're making inside the app, well, it just doesn't quite match up with what you can do out in the real world. And this disconnect, it's so common there's actually a name for it.
The illusion of fluency. It's a huge trap. You could be totally acing all the quizzes, you might have a year-long streak going, you're feeling amazing about it. But then you're faced with a real live person who asks you a simple question you haven't practiced and you just freeze. It happens because the skills that get rewarded inside an app are just not the same skills you need for a real conversation.
Okay, this table breaks down that disconnect perfectly. On one side, you've got what the apps reward. Daily streaks, tapping the right answer, fast responses, earning points. It's all game mechanics, right? But then look at the other side. This is what real fluency requires. Being able to speak spontaneously, understanding nuance, navigating your own mistakes, and actually producing your own thoughts. They're just two totally different skill sets.
Think of it this way. When you only learn set phrases, you're basically memorizing a script. The second a real conversation goes off script, like, the barista asks a question you weren't ready for, the whole thing can just fall apart. You haven't yet learned how to actually think and create in the language. Okay, so if mindlessly tapping on an app isn't the complete answer, then what is? Now we get to the exciting part. Let's look at what the research says about how our brains are actually wired to learn a language. And, spoiler alert, it's probably not what you think. So research points to a few core principles that are way more effective than just drilling words over and over. We're going to focus on 3 of the big ones. First, there's spaced retrieval practice. Then, something called pushed output. And finally, the absolute game changer, interaction plus feedback.
All right, first up, spaced retrieval. This is basically the exact opposite of cramming for a test. Instead of just drilling a word 50 times in a row, the idea is to try and recall it from your memory right at the moment you're about to forget it. It's that little bit of struggle, that effort to remember, that tells your brain, hey, this is important, keep this. It forges a way stronger connection in your memory. It's all about working smarter, not harder.
Next up is pushed output. This is a huge one. It's all about moving from just passively recognizing the language to actually having to create it yourself. It's the difference between understanding what someone else says and building your own sentences to say what you want to say. This is where you really start to own the language, You're putting the pieces together, the grammar, the vocabulary, to express your own unique thoughts.
And there's actually a proven model for how we practice this. It's called I do it, we do it, you do it. It's super simple. First, a teacher or an expert shows you how it's done. Then you try it together with guidance and feedback. And finally, you have to practice it all by yourself. Now, here's the thing about a lot of apps. They're amazing at the we do it part. They're constantly guiding you. But they almost never push you into that crucial you do it stage where you're truly on your own. And that's the gap we need to fill.
Okay, so let's get into smarter tools and smarter practice. The goal here is definitely not to tell you to throw away your phone. No way. It's all about using these tools more strategically. So let's look at how we can take these powerful scientific principles and use them to pick the right tools for the right job.
And this is really the key takeaway here. There's no single magic bullet. Real fluency comes from mixing it all together. We're talking live conversation, reading, writing, getting some cultural exposure. An app can be an awesome tool in your toolbox, for sure, but it should never, ever be the only tool.
All right, so let's get super practical. How can you actually practice spaced retrieval? How do you put this awesome memory technique to work in your day-to-day routine?
Well, there are a few great ways. You can look for tools that have this built right in. For example, some apps have what's called a spaced repetition system, or SRS. You can also use digital flashcard systems. Or, and this is a really cool method, you can use tools that let you read real articles or books and then help you practice the vocabulary you find in them over time. Okay, and what about practicing that interaction and pushed output? This is probably the most important part. How do you practice actually creating the language and, using it with other human beings? This is where you really put that pushed output principle into practice. Well, this is where you got to step outside of those solo apps. There are all kinds of platforms for interaction. You've got mobile exchanges for casual chats with native speakers. For something more structured with a real teacher, there are tutoring platforms. You can even find peer discussion groups online. Or, go old school with in-person events in your city.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. Let's talk about your path to proficiency. With all this information, what does a clear, actionable plan actually look like? The very first thing you need to do is define your goal. Before you pick a single tool, you need a destination. Just saying, I want to learn Spanish is way too vague. A really great system for this is the Common European Framework of Reference, or CEFR for short. It's basically an international standard that gives you a clear roadmap and helps you define what success really looks like.
So take a look at these levels. What's your actual goal? Are you aiming for that basic user level, like an A1 or A2 so you can handle a vacation? Order food, ask for directions, have a simple chat? Or maybe you're aiming higher for an independent user level like B1 or B2, where you can actually work in the language or confidently debate different topics. Knowing your target level changes everything because it tells you exactly which skills you need to be working on.
And that brings us to the final and maybe the most important shift in thinking. For so long, we've been asking which app is the best. But what if that's the wrong question? What if we started asking, what skill do I need to practice today? It's not about finding one perfect app. It's about building a balanced practice. So ask yourself, what do you need right now? Do you need to build vocabulary? Great. A spaced repetition app is perfect for that. Do you need to build confident speaking? Then it's time to find a language partner. When you start focusing on the skill instead of just the tool, that's when you finally move past that illusion of fluency and get on the real and, honestly, much more exciting path to actually speaking another language.